This is the Global Digest think tank group. What is your specialty? Please, Mark.
Thank you very much, Sean, and thank you for inviting me. So I got my master's in public administration and global affairs. Um, the global affairs part had a lot to do with foreign policy and international relations. I wrote my master's thesis on deterring the Chinese invasion of Taiwan. So I'm very interested in that theater, which I'm sure we'll probably get into in a little bit. I did my undergraduate work in philosophy. So I'm very interested in the theoretical as well as the practical because I think there's a lot of uh, dovetailing, if you will, between the two things. So, but yeah, I mean, my interests are international relations, foreign policy, history. I'm a big history buff. I wrote my own little World War II book a number of years ago. But one of the things that I was very interested with the World War II material is something that really matured my understanding of Sino-US relations and the place of China in the world, and that's the matter of technology. When I started studying it, I was looking at China like I would most relations, the military, economy and things like that. But um, China's economic might really came to the foray and showed, the traditional relationships of military powers with each other. It was a little different given the asymmetry between China and the United States and how things have really changed over
Right.
time. But when I was studying that, that led me to technology and artificial intelligence and the semiconductors and how all those things tie together, which just really kind of took things to another level where I could really kind of see, oh, this is the world we're in now. So, for instance, um, trying to think the gentleman's Tony Blinken. He wrote very I think it was from the heart about how he realized one day that he had to have like 10 experts come in every day just to answer basic questions about technology, and that's when he realized I better start looking into this stuff myself. And of course Dr. Kissinger has been very involved with that, or was, and so I'm interested in a lot of those.
It's interesting, Mark. You said you also write related to Taiwan and
Mm-hmm.
Chinese military and economy, all this relation between Chinese US. How can you say current uh, Biden administration US foreign policy in China, particularly, and Taiwan? How did you see?
Well, so I had this crazy idea until the last 6 months or so that I could somehow separate domestic discussions from foreign
Oh,
policy, but that's not really going to fly. So I will give credit to the Biden administration for continuing some of the more important policies towards China that the Trump administration had. But then I just read that just recently he went ahead and okayed a Chinese plant in, I think it's in Michigan somewhere, batteries, a big battery plant, which I'm not too thrilled with that. But for the most part, I think he's realized that it was actually President Obama that was supposed to lead us to the strategic pivot to the east. So well, that's great in theory, bipartisan, right? But in practice, it seems like we've really gotten away from that. Although it seems like in the last days of his administration, he's tried to suddenly kind of get a little bit tougher with China in some ways.
so you want to say Biden is following Obama policy, pivot Asia, pivot.
And the Trump administration too is with banning certain companies as far as like with the semiconductor trade and things like that. I don't think the Biden administration was as tough on China as they should have been. And the reason I say that is because of the doctrine of fusion that China has between their civilian and their military sectors. Um, Not only that, but a lot of the aggressive rhetoric that's come from Xi Jinping and things that they're doing now in South America. And I mean, really, in my opinion, in the best of all possible worlds, we would decouple from China completely. That's not possible. So when I wrote about deterring a Chinese invasion of Taiwan, a big part of that was strategic economic um, uh, attempts to develop stockpiles of strategic resources, whether it's rare earth uh, elements or semiconductors and things like that. And I think we need to do so in conjunction with some such grouping as ASEAN or the Quad, some kind of partnership, because there's a commonality of interests, I believe. China makes claims on the territory of 20 of its fellows over there in Southeast Asia. The list is really quite long. And I'd like to see us, Elbridge Colby has a I think it's an excellent idea, which influenced me a lot, about forming an anti-hegemonic coalition between the United States and some of the ASEAN countries and the other countries in Southeast Asia. Not asking too much though, right? So, like for instance, Vietnam, they're there on the continent. They don't want to get China too upset, but there's some things maybe economically we can do. Some of the island nations, though, like the Philippines, working with bases there, and with Okinawa, with the Japanese and things like that. I think there are things that we could do, but in reality, my understanding of history is that, and demographics, I believe the United States has maybe 20 to 25 years that we can really maintain our position in the Western Pacific. After that, we may have to pull out a little bit. And I think it's important for the United States and for the East Asian nations, not including China, that if the United States has to pull out, the East Asian nations are not left like Afghanistan was, and are not left like Vietnam was. So if we can work with them in the meantime in building up these capabilities, and that includes, a porcupine kind of strategy, arming Taiwan and some of these other nations to defend themselves.
The policy since Obama policy favors China, and right. I mean the policy is good, very good, and that will be much good advantage, and it will be good for America for the future. But the problem is the strategy is not working. The policy is good, favor China, but strategy is not working. And, I don't know in the State Department or foreign policy maker in America or next to the president or surrounding president, most policy maker, I think the president, they don't have strategist expert in US. Either Obama, he doesn't have expert, and even Biden and the Trump, he has to think about that what has wrong with Biden, Obama, and the previous his government, because strategist experts are not surrounding him. Because if they make a good strategy successfully, I mean, the policy, what they lay down will be happening, and it will be good for America future, and as well as for the region, because the strategy, they really not focus how to handle, as example, the dealing with ASEAN and even ASEAN are many small country. So which country and how they approach, not just for they approach for conveniently, more they should think about or how it will be uh, practically uh, will be happening, can be able to deal, and as well as it should be matched with U.S. interests, U.S. ideology, U.S. policy. First, the president needs strategy expert around him, first thing. In America, the problem is president, they don't have experts, strategy experts around him. That's the thing. How do you see that?
Yeah, so the key word you said there was focus. I'm going to get to that in a moment. I like, a couple of Trump's appointments. Hopefully, we'll get through. One is Elbridge Colby, and another one is Marco Rubio. So that's good as far as that strategic pivot to the east. We need more of them. Now, as far as focus, a lot of people aren't going to like to hear this, but this is just a reality. In my opinion, the strategic competitor for the United States is China. The demographics tell that. The world economy tells that. Something like 70% of semiconductors come through the Taiwan Strait. Like 50% of all operational shipping containers come through the Taiwan Strait. Approximately 20% of global maritime trade goes through the Taiwan Strait, as opposed to the Ukraine situation with Russia. It would be nice if we could be the world's policeman and solve all these problems everywhere. We can't. We can't do it economically. We can't do it militarily. I mean, just even things such as the budget for the Pentagon and the State Department and our force posture, the war, preparing for war and trying to deter war, really. In the Taiwan theater, you were talking about asymmetric weapon systems, smart mines, anti-ship missiles, right? Stealth, as opposed to like a lot of this heavy weaponry and things like that we're trying to get to Ukraine. It's a totally different animal. And it's like we're trying to do too much. We should know better from history. And I hope
Right.
that Trump is able to do what he says he thinks he, and Zelensky has spoken very highly, whether he means it or not, of Trump's, that he has confidence that Trump can help bring some kind of settlement to the Ukraine situation. Because if we are bogged down and continue to be bogged down in Ukraine, we're not going to be able to properly address the situation in Taiwan, in my opinion.
Right.
I've seen some of your interviews where you discuss that. And yes, that is Trump's base. A lot of it is Christian. And, that's a large part of the makeup of this country. And,
Right.
We need to be able to, um, respond to the concerns of the constituents.
Right.
And, you know, it's a tricky kind of thing, but I don't think it's tricky compared to something like India, or for instance,
Right.
the Rohingya, like you folks were talking about. Um,
I mean, for America, India, or China, or I mean, they will be a little bit inconvenient for America to handling those big country. It's not, they were not easily likely to accompanying or following what American policy or what American interests, and difficult to persuade them. Those uh, big, a little bit big guys are. But it is perfectly good for America, for ASEAN country. They are not big, they are more flexible and easy for American to handle a smaller one, than those big guys. So that I mean the focus ASEAN is good policy for America, and also it's possible to replace what American wanted and what interested American policy, because as we can see the problem in Biden government, Biden around surrounding Biden policymaker like in Asia, East Asia, ASEAN issue. Biden doesn't have a good strategist expert around him, and he did most of things are not very good in terms of strategy and all this was. Even in case of ASEAN, also we can see as expected, he could not able to success very well in terms of strategy in ASEAN, especially in Burmese case. Biden totally failed. The way Biden Democrats suppose they are initiating democracy and liberal ideology, but not really success. The way Biden dealing with Burmese surrounding Biden, is not helpful for American policy and is not helpful for American strategy, neither for Burmese people, Burmese nation building, because they have done almost nothing successfully, and all are mismatched strategy and policy, and even I don't think Biden administration doesn't have very good expert related to Burma.
So I guess recently, after we put sanctions, it's really dropped a lot, but we still have like a $70 million yearly trade deficit with Burma. It was like $900 million until a couple of years ago. But even still, a $70 million trade deficit, well, that's not good for the United States. Now, someone like Trump can use something like that, I hope, to play hardball. I know you were asking, like, maybe we can threaten like a military kind of stick. I agree with Dr. Harrison. I wouldn't go that for a first kind of approach. I think there's economic and informational aspects that, soft power that we could use. Trump's very good at bluster, and he could hold certain things like, why should we continue trading with you at all? We're losing $70 million now. It was $900 million a couple of years ago. We're just going to cut it all off then, unless you're willing to, abide by your human rights commitments and things like that. But there has to be a will, like you were saying, there have to be advisors, like what happened with Afghanistan, particularly after when Russia invaded Ukraine, just went completely into the background. There have to be people around him that can say, sir, we know this is not the center of gravity, but it's not going to take, we're not talking about a military operation here, just a little bit of creativity. Like, why not say, fly over and drop a whole lot of propaganda videos and leaflets so that the people can read about and see and watch newsreels of how corrupt their leadership is and realize they're not being bombed with bombs, they're being bombed with information packets and things like that. That's just something off the top of my head. Sometimes a little bit of creativity can smooth things out. But
right, how his policy will be shaped in Asia or the whole world. Maybe you said maybe Ukraine case, Trump might not be that much. They will provide financial aid or any aid to Ukraine. And I don't know, how do you see the whole Trump foreign policy?
I think that even President Zelensky understands that that first of all, Ukraine cannot win a prolonged conflict there. It's not going to happen, not without starting World War III, proxy wars here, proxy wars there, risking a NATO country getting bombed and triggering Article 5 of NATO. That's not good. So I think that even President Zelensky is realizing now they need to find a way out, and it's not going to be that hard to do. The problem Trump is going to run up against, I think, are going to be those advisors that are whispering in his ear, no, sir, we know we have to end the war, but we have to, win a battle. Ukrainians have to win a battle first so they can get a good seat at the table. And they'll provide him military arguments. A lot of these people are knee deep in the military industrial complex. Now, I'm not slamming the military industrial complex. Without it, we wouldn't survive. But it is an inducement to corruption, because people have an interest in continuing, through their lobbies. So as far as aid to Ukraine and things like that, and weaponry, I wouldn't just overnight say no. We can't renege on our commitments. Even though I don't agree with the policies towards Ukraine under the Biden administration, we've made commitments, so we have to live up to them. At the same time, we need to be negotiating, and those commitments have to be part of it. That's actual diplomacy. Remember James Baker back in the first Iraq war? James Baker had like 19 countries, a whole bunch of Arabic countries on the same coalition. He had Saudi Arabia, Syria, and de facto with Israel, okay, all working together, even though Israel wasn't technically part of the coalition. That took will, it took a lot of travel and a lot of creativity, but James Baker was able to do that. I don't think it's that we don't have James Bakers anymore. I think that they're not necessarily within earshot of the president.
Right. How about if you look at Asia, East Asia, how will it look like Trump upcoming foreign policy? For example, ASEAN is there, and well, Trump will be willing to talk again with North Korea, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah, with North Korea, that's all I'll really say on that, because I'm not an expert on North Korea by any stretch. But what I will say is, I think there are certain things that we should negotiate with the Chinese and through back channels behind closed doors, things that would not be proper to be made public. One of them is in case of conflict over Taiwan, there are certain things that should be off the table, like attacks on mainland China by nuclear armed nations, which means us. If maybe we could meet with them and say, hey, look, if that's going to happen, it will be our partners, but it won't be anyone who has offensive nuclear capabilities. Also, such things as, like you were just saying right there, as far as with North Korea, look, hey, we understand for domestic reasons you need to back North Korea to a certain extent, but we know that you don't want North Korea's nuclear program getting too big either. So there's certain conditions I think we could come to an understanding with China in a non-official way, just some very basics that will help from pouring kerosene on the fire down the road. And China can still saber rattle at us in public and back North Korea to a certain extent. But if we can have a certain extent understanding with China towards North Korea, because we have a common interest in North Korea not getting too big for its britches, I think. But that's as much as I really have an opinion on the North Korea situation.
So I think you can forget about North Korea, but you said Taiwan. American will not be happy if Chinese aggressively invading Taiwan or attacking Taiwan, right? So probably somehow directly or indirectly, U.S. will remain involved in Taiwan crisis, right?
Yes, oh, definitely. I mean, I think we definitely need to, the whole peace through strength thing, which everyone talks about Trump, but that goes back to Ronald Reagan, peace through strength against the Soviet Union. We definitely need to have a deterrent posture and a strong force posture. Right. But at the same time, I think some of that needs to be done on the quiet. So I don't know if it was Eldridge Colby or Ian Easton, one of them had mentioned that, when we can train cadres of Taiwanese troops um, with our, with our world-class officers and NCOs, but we can do it in the United States. We don't need to do it on Taiwan under the prying eyes of Chinese reconnaissance. So there's certain things that we can do. We don't have to go out and announce things. Certain deals, sending weapons to Taiwan and things like that. Of course, China's going to know about. But the more we can keep things kind of quiet for some things, I think would be helpful, because I think China is a very proud culture, and they don't want to be shamed publicly. That would be that's not good. We don't need to do that. With other things, we need to public displays, right? Just like China has given certain public displays when we've done things that they don't like. But there has to be a balance of things sub rosa, if you will, and then things done because really, I think we're playing for time for maybe 20 years. She has publicly stated he wants to, wrap up this great rejuvenation by 2049, 100th year anniversary of the PRC, and we have a limited time frame to enable the East Asian nations to defend themselves, at least to the point that it will not be worth China's while to invade. Transports is another big thing too. I hear a lot about these new fighters and things like that China's coming out with. I'm more interested in their fishing vessels and their junkets and their transports. So things like that aren't as sexy and aren't as big in the public eye. If we can help with their patrols, protecting the underseas cables, which is another recent thing. There's 14 cables, I believe, 14 cables connecting Taiwan to the internet. Those are the first things that are going to be cut if China does decide to invade. So things like that can be done away from the public eye, but protected, and a lot of information, intelligence, reconnaissance, and things like that. I think we need to heavily invest in and be involved with. We have to be prepared to, if things go kinetic, to do what we have to do, but that would be a worst case scenario because China, of course, like the United States, has nuclear weapons.
Right.
I'm hoping that Elbridge Colby and Marco Rubio will keep his eye on China, because I think they're gonna hit home to him, the economic impacts. I don't know if Trump is as up on the military aspects of it. But I think those are two very good appointments, and I really hope that they get through. But I understand what you're saying. I think Trump can be easily distracted by proxy provocations or what have you, and that can't happen. We need to, when we make our budgets at the Pentagon, for instance, they need to be long term, and we need to stick to them, and it needs to outlast Trump's 4 years. He needs to know that. They need to get him when he's in a rah-rah mood and upset with China. That's when they need to get his signature on these things, so that when he gets distracted eventually on other things, things are already set in place, hopefully.
So since Philippines and America, US is they are allies, also military alliance. So if anything, Chinese aggressive Philippines, well, US will be remain aligned with US, Philippines, and they will defend together. What you see like that?
Yes, definitely. I think so. I mean, I forget, was it one or two bases recently that we worked with opening with Philippines just like about a year ago or so. I think that's very important. And even Vietnam, I think there's economic diplomacy and things like that can be done without Vietnam getting in too much trouble with China. But Philippines, that's definitely one of, the first island chain nations and anything in that basic area, as well as then back on the mainland in Southeast Asia too, whatever we can do.
Right. So maybe, I don't know, Trump see there are more potential economic cooperation in ASEAN country. I mean, well, the ASEAN can Trump see that ASEAN has capacity to replace what China is doing manufacturing, and
Mhm.
what Trump will be likely to shape in that situation. It's part of people China.
I don't think he's going to get two hands on that himself. So I'm hoping it's going to be the China Hawks and administration that will um, get involved as far as a manufacturing basis like the TPP. Trump, I believe, was against that. I think that's something we should try to resurrect, but we can't. They don't call it a TPP anymore. I forget what they call it. It's a whole bunch of initials now, but something along those lines. And really, this is something a lot of people won't like either. But basically, I think we should help to form an Asian NATO for the contingency that if the United States has to withdraw, whether for economic reasons or for political reasons, at some point, not even in the next 4 years, but down the road a little bit, given the history of how empires go, having to retrench a little bit and limit their areas of responsibility. If we can create something like an Asian NATO, which I think should be tied in with like an ASEAN economically, strategic resources, and stronger diplomatic ties, we can help in those things. We're not, we're not in ASEAN. We're not going to be there, being front and center, but we can do a lot to facilitate those things. I don't think Trump will necessarily be all that directly involved with that, but he doesn't have to. His advisors just have to get him at the right moments to sign the right papers when he's in the right mood.
Right. Yeah. He need to aware, right? He should get the right strategic expertise and the right policy expertise from the region, as well as U.S. expertise, because Biden case, he lost a lot of, he not able to recruit a lot of expertise from the region. How do you see about what most U.S. is worrying and Trump might be worrying in terms of foreign policy in East Asia and ASEAN? What he feel something he need to change, or he need to pay attention in ASEAN or China in the region?
Um, if I had a guess, I would wonder if Trump is aware of the importance of, for instance, like you mentioned, the Philippines, and ASEAN and some of the smaller nations. The importance, because individually they may look like small nations, but together, it's really necessary for our own and also China's East Asian neighbors for the
Right.
security. And I'm worried that he's not going to see that. He's only going to see the big dog, China, and might, Trump was not the best in dealing with our European allies. So I don't expect that he'll be the best in dealing with our partners and allies in East Asia the best either. Again, I don't think he needs to. I think if some of his appointments make it through, that they can at least try to get the foundations laid for things we're talking about, like with ASEAN and
Right.
maybe in NATO.
You said NATO-like military organization in, or NATO-like organization in East Asia. It will be ASEAN plus something like that. It can be called NATO-like, including trilateral, quadrilateral, like Quad, like US have developed trilateral, Philippines, Japan, America, also Japan, South Korea, US, and
Yeah,
Quad is
Australia. Yeah.
Quad is Australia, India. So there are many grouping and many bilateral, multilateral groups. So it can form, but maybe unlike uh, European, maybe Asia organization might not be, very tight. It will be loosely organized. It can be something like that. It will be happen, I guess.
If we can help them develop their economic interrelationships and ties together, though, that might make it a little bit of a stronger foundation. And I know that
Right.
they can't call it an Asian NATO. I know China says, oh, you're trying to make an Asian. Obviously, don't call it that, but that's basically what we need to do. And then the economic stockpiling and the resources too. We should help facilitate those relationships through diplomacy to try to make the foundations stronger. The nations might not like each other, but if they can see that they have an economic stake in working with each other because they're small nations and China's this big behemoth, I think that's an avenue we can try to help.
So I agree with you. Even big country, if their economics is weak, it will be nothing, like Russia during Cold War and post-Cold War, you can see once they weaken economy, the giant powerful country is like that other, middle country level. So I agree that if U.S. empower economically, they boost economy in ASEAN country, it is very sufficient for, U.S. security and any conflict with China. I think it will be absolutely solve those any problem because if ASEAN country is a good enough, even now most are very bad economy and even they don't have enough survival for economy, still uh, able to deter China and any big country, with in their own. Once U.S., as you said, economy grow, they support in ASEAN, they will have, middle level economy. They can have, you know, the sufficient professional military and some military supply. That will be very enough to, defend compared to right now, because now they are wholly equipped with military weapon and military technology, those things, So it is very much this is possible, and this is a strategic way to boost economies in ASEAN is key, I believe.
Yeah, and I think we almost have to think of it like a lend lease too, because Taiwan and a lot of these nations are very dependent on China for trade. Like 40% of Taiwan's exports through China, 20% of their imports. So some of that money that I think we're spending in tertiary theaters, not just Ukraine, but Syria and in the Middle East, I think a lot of that should be funneled towards helping Taiwan and other nations try to reduce their dependency on China, not all at once, because we don't want to, upset the big dragon too much. But these are some of the things we have to think about. Whereas if we're in all these, secondary kind of conflicts, we're not going to be able to do that.
Right. As Trump is more interested in economy, and Trump must think, whatever Chinese manufacture, it can happen in ASEAN country. It can same products can produce in ASEAN, even much cheaper price and much convenient compared to China. China is, you cannot make like easily friends, or like you cannot call China like younger brother, or you cannot easily engage. But ASEAN case, China, US can much easy way to deal in terms of foreign policy, economically, or less expenses, and that's also equally able to fulfill what U.S. interests too. And that will also helpful for ASEAN country, the people lifestyle living, their living will be improved, their living condition will be improved, and all this infrastructure will improve. That will be both win for those ASEAN country and US. I believe that Trump could consider very detailed, deeply,
Yeah, and I think it should be broached to him like, look, sir, this is an investment. You're not going to get a return in a few years. We should take a page from China on this. With China's special economic zones, they don't really care if they lose money. It's a security architecture investment. Down the road, it's an economic investment for the BRI with no pun intended. But they don't care if they lose money in the short term, say at Port Hanbantota or wherever. The real estate and the geopolitical value of those trade routes are much more important. And I think Trump needs to be maybe educated on these things a little bit more. These are investments that sometimes it's good to lose a little bit of money if you're gaining security instead of
right,
just thinking about everything as a real estate deal.
right. Compared to Biden, uh, in my in my view, Trump might be also considered seriously ideological point of view. They can cooperate ideologically, political, geopolitically, ideological combination, international uh, power, they can build up. How do you think? Well, Trump see that or he did not see that?
He'll only see it if he's made to see it and to see the value in it. There's a strong, both Buddhism and Christianity have a strong pro-human rights element to that, and someone like the Dalai Lama, although he's getting on in years, but leaders like that can work together to bridge with those communities that have those shared values. If we can get in like the American Midwest kind of values too with that, but again, like a coalition of people, because if Americans just see Asians, they're not really gonna care as much. If they can see a mixture of Americans and American religious and civil leaders that are arm in arm and working with Buddhists and Christians in other lands, oh, those people have similar values to me. I didn't know that. Things like that. So if Trump's constituents start thinking, hey, just like a lot of people were, I support Ukraine like 2 days later, even though they didn't know the first thing about what was going on over there. If we can, through the media and through information, propaganda, whatever you want to call it, if we can promote people to see that there's a lot of similar beliefs in East Asia as far as promoting human rights and anti-war and things like that, then Trump might think, oh, well, in order to get my people elected in the midterms, then yeah, I should talk about that. That might be a way to get into Trump's interest with that. It'd be
Right,
difficult.
right. I mean, we can say there's ideological value-based geopolitics between ASEAN and United States, and maybe and Repub- Trump and Republican Party might be more interest Christian community. It will
Right.
be more relevant Christian community in ASEAN. And even though there are not big Christian community in ASEAN, but the US is still willing to engage with Buddhist community, right? Compared to other communities. So first choice may be Christian community, maybe also second will be Buddhist community. That will be enough for building ASEAN regional or cooperation. Of course, we have many Christian community in many ASEAN countries. In Burma also, we have Christian community, good number, I mean, a good uh, location, they are Christian. 3, 4 states has Christian in Burma. And also, Singapore also has partially Christian. So many ASEAN countries, I think that will be flexible for American Christian value and Christian ideology for international cooperation. So I think that they can, that we just foresee for the future, you know, you cannot go only with one way, you have to see all direction, ideological side,
Yes.
military side, economical side. So all this can make one very perfect, strategy, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back at the when Reagan was president, the opinion poll against, I think, supporting the Contras, most of the country was against it, and then all of a sudden, a little bit of magic with TV and propaganda, and then most of the country was in favor of it, even though it became illegal at one point. So I think with the right, Voice of America or whoever in that theater is going to do it, people love a story about an individual. Most people, I think both of us are very interested in ideas, and most policy people are, but the average person is interested in an individual with a name that represents those things. So a movie that's really heavily promoted, someone standing up for human rights in the ASEAN countries or things like that. All it takes is the right kind of promotion. Hollywood could do it like that if they wanted to, but Hollywood's not really on the same page as us. But if the Trump administration wanted to do that, there are mechanisms in place that could make these films, music tracks, events, cultural diplomacy, if you would. It would need to be kind of hyped, but it could easily be done if the will is there with the right people.
Right, right. I mean, it's true, as we said, if U.S. focus ideologically value based in ASEAN, you said already, the ASEAN has many human rights supporter and human rights advocate in ASEAN region. It's true, there are many people, they support human rights. Also, you said the Buddhist community, Christian community in ASEAN are very much pro human rights and pro human rights supporter. So it will be matched with U.S. Ideology, value based, that U.S. is doing, So in that way, that is a way very much possible cooperation in that line. And the thing is strategy and implementation, the policy just Biden did, as we said, and implementation and strategy is nothing happened. They failed. Biden failed. Biden policy was failed. I mean, it's not such in case, Burmese case, they failed. They did not done anything very well, and the way they are dealing Burmese is very unsatisfactory
Yeah.
for Burmese democratization and human rights promotion. What Biden did is very unsatisfactory. So Trump should be see the lesson from Biden, and he need how it will be in line with U.S. interests, like strategies, expertise, and all these intellectual. Trump need to also concern, right? Not just top level, but even Trump should see all this officer level and all this stuff. He should be aware because during Biden mistake, a lot of staff. They recruit many things and they bring nothing, and that led to loss Biden policy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, a lot of it is a lot of our politicians are just focused, for their next election, and they're not thinking long-term national strategy. China, to their credit, they think long-term strategy, and we need to do that if we're going to be able to compete, and as well as to help. Because again, there's that symbiosis. China's East Asian neighbors need us, and we need them. But we
Right,
can't just be thinking 4 years ahead. It'll be a lot longer than that.
right. So the other thing is, as U.S. and ASEAN people interest for human rights promoting and liberal democracy promoting. But the thing is, for example, many Chinese companies are not promoting at all human rights and liberal democracy. They sometimes supporting dictator and authoritarian Chinese company. They should punish, you know, those are not in line with the policy and strategy.
And American companies too, quite frankly. We have the Federal Agents Registration Act, the FARA. We need to actually reinforce it. American companies, we need to, a lot of American companies are only concerned with the bottom line and aren't concerned with our national security. And if we don't clean up with that, it's going to be hard to do anything overseas.
Right? So not just American, even Japanese or South Korean or Taiwan company, if they become pro dictator or pro communist, and they only looking for money, but they don't look human right and liberal democracy, that will be affected U.S. policy and U.S. strategy in bigger picture. They should also clean those company and those individuals, if possible, isn't it?
That's what got to use the bully pulpit, naming and shaming. If Trump gets out there and names and shames, this company is doing that and they're making money off of, the blood of the Uyghurs or whoever, then people will remember as long as you're still talking about it. If you stop talking about it, people will forget 2 weeks later. So there are some things that we can actually make a difference with simple things. There has to be a will and a little bit of creativity.
I don't know. Trump is willing to do it, or will he pay much such kind of headache? Because a lot of things may be necessary to clean if you go further that deep, checking and cleaning those things. I mean, it's not that uh, easy. Somebody need a very much commitment, to go detail. Well, Trump will do. How did you see possibility?
But yeah, I think you have to make a connection in his mind between, so for instance, the protectionist policies, which both Trump and Biden have, I think, been pretty good at to a certain extent. I think Trump did a better job against China. But if you can make a connection in Trump's mind between the protectionist policies and the public opinion about human rights, that, hey, if I can tie these together in my voters' minds, that will help me be able to get the things passed that I want, and it will be good for the economy. And then the people that are more concerned with the human rights, well, that's okay, that's good. We'll work together. Somehow trying to tie these things in, because really, I think Trump, his main concern is the bottom line. He's a businessman. I don't think he's a bad man, but he's a businessman.
Right.
So with enough creativity among the advisors, and maybe say, like you were talking about, like the Christian groups and the Buddhist groups, like, sir, if you meet with these people, that will help us on the human rights front, which will become a force multiplier for the economic front. Use language like that, or however you can get it through to him. I don't know.
I mean that's true. it will make more effective for the U.S. policy as well, and U.S. strategy, because you are dealing somebody today with different idea, different ideology. So once you base very strongly in line with the same value and the same ideology in the region, in ASEAN, as you said, Christian community, or who support human rights in Buddhist community. Trump doesn't, US doesn't need to worry next time to change another community. They can build on next step successful like that. Otherwise, you will never go further step, because you have to changing your foundation, value-based, same value, same ideology. You need to change all the time, and you never go. And that's usually superpower fall down because they could not go further step.
I think a lot of it has to do with getting people back into the higher ranks of the military to see these things through a lens of national security, so that these things can be cemented from the military angle, and then the things that we're talking about with the cultural and the economic things too, those can last beyond 4 years, but not by themselves. They also need the military folks to see this as something important enough that it has to be like a 20-year plan or something more than that. That if we can brand it as a national security issue, then the Joint Chiefs and the NSC and these people that are still going to be there 10 years from now or whatever are going to take it seriously. But if we keep the same people in place that have been operating for the last, I don't know how many years, that we're just interested in the bottom line, that's not going to, because a lot of these people, whether in military or diplomats or what have you, when their career is done or in between holding offices, they go to China or and they set up shop with business. Even Henry Kissinger set up Kissinger Associates in China and made millions of dollars over there. And then he'd go on TV after Tiananmen Square and say, no, we need to, and President Bush too, he had a brother that was involved in business dealings in China at that time. No, we need to renew most favored nation and this reason and that. And Peter Schweitzer makes a very good point that, when these stock gurus go on TV and they tell you, oh, pick this stock, pick that, they have to have a disclaimer if they have a conflict of interest. But the former diplomats and the former politicians or military people, they don't have to do that. When they're invited on the show, there should be a law for that. FARA is one thing, but it needs to be stronger. And there can be mechanisms put in place, but there has to be a will.
Right. U.S. American people should think, Christian community in America should think more for a long time, not just for Trump, Yeah. Trump in the White House will be just 4 years, then finish. So it's not for Trump in the White House. Trump in the White House is not a big issue now. So U.S. American Christian has to see long-term international cooperation, geopolitical cooperation in line with the same value, the same ideology, who also support and interest human rights and liberal democracy. That will be stable and stronger, So not just for 4-year White House for Trump. So Trump may be, for powering Trump is just 4 years. Trump may be not big issue, but American Christian community has more concern for long time, stronger and stability. Right.
Yeah, and that's where a lot of these appointments for people that will be there beyond 4 years are very important.
Now the crucial thing is Trump need enough expertise, strategists, expert from the ASEAN region, and as well as in American domestic expertise. I'm not sure Trump is well prepared yet. I don't think they already have whatever necessary. I don't think they yet to build the strategy and policy, foreign policy.
Yeah, and reforming again the military and the people at their heads that are at the heads of the military and the upper echelons, I think is part of that, as well as advisors and the so-called deep state. Well, the deep state can be bad if there are people that are corrupt or just interested in the bottom line. It can be good if they're going to be there 20 years from now and they're interested in the long-term good of this country. So that's things like the Asia Pacific, human rights, the connection between these things and our economy. Semiconductors is a classic example, or rare earth minerals. These need to become household words. Ukraine's a household word, Syria's a household word, Israel's a household word. That's great, but as far as the bigger picture, I think these other things need to, the average American needs to become more informed about these things, because constituents and pressure groups can perhaps exert some pressure from below.
Right. Biden administration, you see surrounding Biden and all this expertise, policy maker and strategy expertise.
We all share the Constitution. That without that, that's the supreme law of the land, the Supremacy Clause in the Constitution itself. So if we can again get people back to the Constitution, because there's changes that have been made in this country. We're kind of getting away from these guide rails that have kept us grounded for 200 years. Once we start playing fast and loose with that, you have a problem. Now, I think it so happens that a lot of the principles of the Constitution dovetail quite nicely with the Christian ethos in this country. Particularly like the Protestant ethic for a long time as well, many Catholic charities and things like that for human rights. So these things can be cast in a language that can appeal across denominations and across faiths. If you're talking to a Christian audience, then sure, talk about that. But to America as a whole, I think we need to keep the Constitution in mind, things that are constitutional and things that are not, that both parties have committed violations of, in my opinion, my understanding of the Constitution over the years. And we need to get back to the rule of law. I know we score higher than most countries, the rule of law, but the corruption's gotten pretty bad in this country.
Who should be able to make American, value human rights, Christian value? So do you think Trump should have such kind of people surrounding him?
I'm more interested in the merit of the person. Yes, this is mostly a Christian nation. If they can get through to the people better, that's fine. But my bottom line with that is in the First Amendment, which is not just about freedom of speech, but also freedom of religion. So if they're a staunch supporter of the First Amendment, then that's great. If it's going to be more effective if they're Christian, then that's great.
Right.